When I was in junior high school, every day at lunch was a game of strategy like chess and Monopoly put together. There was always the question of where would I be able to sit? And of course, when you're in junior high school and middle school, the question of where you sit at lunch means everything, right? If you get to sit with the cool kids, some of their residual coolness rubs off on you and you matter like they do. If you hang out with the unpopular kids, their unpopularity rubs off on you and you're one of those people. I can remember feeling that tension entering into 7th and 8th grade between whether I should still hang out with the kids who I'd hung out with in elementary school, even though they weren't necessarily the coolest of the cool, and neither was I, or should I try and make this my big break into the big leagues of the popular kids? If maybe I could be brought into the coattails of somebody who was moderately cool and accepted with them, I could leave the other people behind. Maybe you were there too when you were in elementary and junior high school, playing that game of tying your status to who you got to hang out with in the lunchroom. Some of us never left it behind. Maybe in some way, all of us still feel pulled back to that same old way of thinking. So much of the grown-up world still is all about how do I rank compared to somebody else, and what are the things I can do to make my status more important than the person beside me? How do I get myself tethered to the really important people, and how do I leave behind the unimportant, unpopular people like old dead weight? We still play that game. Maybe we've left behind the lunch boxes and trays of the cafeteria, but we still play those games with the people we hang out with in our social circles and our job credentials and our neighborhoods we live in and the groups we're affiliated with. We play that game in so many ways still, and it is draining the life out of us. Jesus offers an alternative. He is always offering an alternative. But this coming Sunday, we're going to hear Jesus give direction that at first sounds just like it's a matter of etiquette. It's about how to order a table of guests at your dinner party. But it's really about leaving behind a whole old way of life where I'm so worried about status that I keep other people out and I try to appeal to the people I think will lift me up in social standing. This coming Sunday, we're going to hear from Luke's gospel when Jesus talks both as a guest about what it's like when he's the guest at a dinner party, and what it's like, he says, if you're a guest at a dinner party, instead of putting yourself up with the most important and most prominent people, start out low, right? Let yourself be invited up. That allows you to be invited forward rather than being the one always trying to hang out, be at the right or left hand of the cool kids, and then ending up being ashamed if it turns out there's no room for you there. And then Jesus goes even further and says, when you're the host, instead of inviting all the important people, the people who can pay you back with social favors, the ones who will invite you to their house for a fancy dinner or tea party, instead, find the nobodies. Find the ones who are excluded, the ones who can't pay you back, the ones who are treated as unimportant, the ones who are treated as less than in the world, and honor them. In other words, leave behind the whole junior high school cafeteria way of thinking. Leave it behind. We are beyond that. We are matured from that now. Instead, be the kind of people who find the ones who've been pushed aside, the ones who've been left out, the ones who were last picked in gym class, the ones who were overlooked and treated like they didn't matter, and make those into your social circle. Because here's the secret, Jesus says. This is how God runs the universe. Jesus goes on later on in Luke 14 to tell a story about a man throwing a big party, and when the official guests who've been invited, the well-to-do, the who's who of the community all take a pass and don't come, the party will not be pooped at. Instead, the host of the party finds the anybody's and the nobodies and the crippled and the poor and those who can't pay him back and invites them to the party so the party will go on. This is how God does things. To find the anybody's and to gather them around God's table. And no more to play the game of trying to climb up the social ladder by who we surround ourselves with. Jesus says that kind of freedom isn't something we just have to wait for when we get to heaven. That kind of freedom is possible now. We can be done playing those old, tired, sad, immature, adolescent games. If you could remember how tiring it was in middle school and junior high school, to be always doing the calculus of where your coolness stood compared to other people, and where you got to hang out with, or where you got to sit at lunch, and who you were cool enough to sit with, and who you could leave behind. If you are just tired of that, Jesus says we are free. We're free to leave that old way of thinking behind, and instead to open our tables the way God sets the table of heaven, where all of us who at some point have been anybody's and nobodies are told you are somebody. You belong and there's a place for you. And where we can do that for the people around us without worrying about what we get out of the deal, because we're done with that kind of thinking. Join us this coming Sunday as we hear those words from Jesus, as we find ourselves invited to a different kind of table setting, and as we find ourselves welcomed to Jesus' table as well. See you Sunday.